And with that, I will hand it off to Becky to formally introduce herself.
All right, just shared my screen. I want to make sure that everybody's seeing it. All right, great. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for spending part of your day with me today to hear about the Master Naturalist program, but also about nature and people and volunteerism. Um, as I say in my title slide here, I think we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when that individual curiosity about nature leads to action. As Katie said, my name is Becky Sapper, and I work for UW-Madison's Division of Extension in the Natural Resources Institute, which in our extension family is a bit like a cousin to the Institute for Human Development and Relationships. But I'm very lucky to be able to lead the Master Naturalist program for our state, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. But what we're going to talk about today are really three topics. I want to talk about the positive impacts that nature has on people, but also then the positive impacts that people have on nature. And then volunteerism in the Master Naturalist program, where I think is the magic happens when these two things kind of come together. So the style of my presentation today, so to speak, I'm going to share some information with you through the slides. And I did switch a few of the slides up from what was shared yesterday. They're still the same slides, but I may have switched a little bit of the order and the tail end of the presentation. So just be aware of that if you're looking off the hard copy of the slides. I will ask for some responses using the chat feature so that you all can see and read some thoughts shared by others who are part of this conversation today. And I'll also bring in some other voices from the Master Naturalist community in the form of a video. If you have questions, feel free to jot them down and we'll have time to get to them at the end of the presentation. So with that, a little bit more about me, because I think it's nice sometimes to always know who's speaking and where they're actually even physically sitting. So I am located in Ashland, Wisconsin on Lake Superior. My office is located at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center. So if you're in the area, please feel free to stop in and say hi. I've worked with Extension for nearly 18 years now in a couple of different roles, but mainly focusing on natural resources partnerships and collaborations and program development. And also volunteer engagement. But prior to Extension, I worked for the Nature Conservancy for 10 years, focusing on conservation easements, landowner education, and invasive species. And you'll notice that even though my experience is very nature-based, it's also been connected to people too. And not necessarily intentionally, because my degree and my interest has always been wildlife, so birds of prey and any furry critter really, and fish too. But it really has become apparent to me that if I want to make a difference in the things that I care about the most, that I also need to work with people. And so that's what kind of led me to where I am today. I do think nature is very cool though, and awe-inspiring. So if you happen to see one of the past Wise Wisconsin presentations about the power of awe with Jackie Carantini, or read the book, The Power of Awe with Dr. Keltner, I think you'll understand a little bit more about what I mean by awe. So not necessarily the awe as in awe, these things are cute, but awe as in like, wow, this is amazing and inspiring. So I do feel that nature is awe-inspiring, but also, um, it really fuels my passion when I'm with a group of people and we're out in nature and they learn something new about nature and there's the collective just gasp when they learn something new. That is what inspires me to help to continue to have others learn about nature and the awe aspect of nature. But I also feel like nature has the ability to hold powerful memories for many of us. Um, my earliest memory of nature is when I was probably 5 or 6 and my parents had some friends over and the kids were all running around outside and the one friend of my parents said something about all the cardinals in the area. And I grew up near St. Louis, Missouri, so even at 5, I knew what a cardinal was. But I didn't see any red birds flying around at the time. And when she mentioned it a second or third time of, oh, there's the cardinals again, I stopped and said, where? Because I didn't see the cardinals. And she goes, oh, I'm not seeing them, but I'm hearing them. And she taught me what the call of the cardinal was. And that was the first time I understood that all of the songs that I was hearing out in nature that I just knew were birds singing, that they actually had different calls for different species. And that is one of my first memories. So I'm curious, what about you? You know, what's your earliest memory of nature? When did you experience nature or the outdoors for the first time? And if you can add that into the chat if you'd like. I'm not going to read them out or discuss them, but I think it's interesting to hear from other people about what their earliest memories of nature are. So as I'm chatting, feel free to add that to the chat. And I will look at them though when we are finished with the program as well, because I am curious about that as well. You know, another early memory for me is gardening with my dad, you know, playing in the dirt, or as my college professors would correct me, soil, not dirt, because dirt apparently is what gets tracked into the house. Soil is more of that magical substrate outside that can help tell you about the history and the future of an area and what will grow there. But in gardening with my dad, I also learned a lot about deer and rabbits and birds and all the other critters that were trying to harvest from our garden at the same time that we were too. So I enjoy uh, those memories of nature with my dad as well. And I think what you'll find is that people relate to nature, how people relate to nature often connects to those early influences and the time spent with family or grandparents or aunties and uncles and friends. And as you're recalling your memories, um, I'd like you to also consider, are you also a memory maker for someone else's first positive outdoor experience? And I bet many of you are, even if you don't know it. And if not yet, I bet there's time that you still can be a memory maker for somebody else. And while I'm not going to get into it into great detail with the presentation today, I do want to recognize that not everyone necessarily has a positive memory to their first introduction of nature, and it can be traumatic for some that have fears that grow into phobias of snakes and spiders and bats and what I consider are the cool species of wildlife that sometimes get a bad rap. But we don't automatically think that everyone's going to enjoy a paddle on a lake because some folks have had a negative introduction to swimming in their youth. And I think it's important to recognize that aspect as well, too. But we're not going to, that's not what we're going to focus on today. Today, we're really going to focus a little bit more on nature's impact on our well-being. And I hope you also had an opportunity, if you didn't hear it in real time, an opportunity to go back and listen to the presentation. I think it was in 23 with Renee Koenig and the Nature and Wellbeing presentation with Wise, Wisconsin, because it's a really good presentation that gives more background and to this concept in a lot more detail. But one of the examples that come to mind for me too, as far as impact on our own well-being, was during the pandemic. I remember many of my colleagues who didn't work in the natural resources realm were talking about how they were finding peace and calm and solace in being outdoors, you know, taking a walk, gardening, or bird watching. And at my home, it happened to be a very banner year for leopard frogs. They were all over the place. We couldn't walk through the yard without kicking up a frog here and there. And my kids spent hours upon hours that summer catching frogs, which sounds really cute. But in 2020, my kids were 18 and 20 years old. They weren't little kids. They were a senior in high school and in college that were being forced to spend the time home with parents during this time. And I would say there's nothing it's not much funnier than watching a 6'7", 18-year-old boy chase frogs across the yard and then appear at my office window holding up the frogs that he just caught with a smile on his face. So I also wonder, do you have positive memories of nature during one of our most trying times in recent memory during the pandemic? While we each have our stories, there's also research that shows that humans do benefit from time being spent in nature. And this infographic, which I will provide to Sarah, and she's welcome to share out after the presentation if possible, shows some of these benefits. So we know about physical health benefits. So we understand that our heart rate and our blood pressure are lowered, that the stress response that we have is reduced while we're in nature, and that there's that magical part of our nervous system that deals with how we calm actually fires. So we become much more calm in nature. And there's also mental health benefits as well. We have many more positive thoughts. We have more mental energy and physical energy. We have a greater sense of purpose with fewer negative emotions and fewer symptoms from anxiety and depression and stress. And it also just helps how we process thoughts as well with our cognitive thoughts. I wonder if you recall the last time you were at a doctor's visit or in the hospital, do you remember seeing photos of nature on the walls? I think next time you go, look around. And I bet you will see, and regardless of what hospital that you visit or what doctor's office that you visit, there are images of nature on the wall. And that's because it's proven that even having exposure to nature in the form of photos helps people heal sooner, helps them get released from the hospital quicker and have shorter hospital stays, provides a place for a patient to retreat to mentally. And while that's just powerful in itself, that being exposed to nature has benefits, when you develop a connection to nature, such as touching the earth as you plant some native flowers, or making a snowman with grandkids, or going fishing, even if you see a great blue heron catch more than you do, that connection will still have a greater benefit to you than being just exposed to nature through pictures. And spending 120 minutes in nature per week has shown to have significant impacts to your health and well-being. And there's other aspects as well too. Our youth show an increased competency with both their academics and their ability to socialize with others when they spend time in nature. In our local communities, there's a lower sense of crime rate when there's time spent in nature or nature in their communities, greater parks. Then there's a sense of community by having a gathering space in those nature spaces. And it's also been shown that folks who have been released from prison or jail and have been exposed to nature, spend time in nature, have a reduced chances of committing additional crimes and returning to incarceration. And I think that's really powerful data. And that data is backed up with the references and citations that are on the backside of this infographic. So if you're wondering where those statements came from, they actually came from studies and research that was done. And if you want to learn more about all of those, then there's links to it in the references. And again, we'll share this after the presentation. But if this isn't enough evidence for you, then there's also this tweet by Snuffleupagus, who says, "Whenever I feel overwhelmed, my mommy tells me to go outside, take a deep breath, and enjoy a moment in nature." So you can also listen to the advice from Snuffleupagus and his mommy. All right. So I want to share with you pieces of a documentary that was created by a UW-Madison student by the name of Sammy Stidham. She approached me about 2 years ago and said she had a senior project that she was doing and she needed to create a documentary. And so she wanted to focus on this topic of well-being and nature. And so she interviewed, I think 5 of our master naturalists, and I wanted to share parts of this with you. The whole documentary is 18 minutes, so I'm not going to show the whole thing. So I'm going to show some little clips from it. I hope that you will have a chance to go back and maybe watch the entire thing. And again, I'll share that link with Sarah so that can be shared. So bear with me for just a moment as I switch between platforms here and get this video rolling.
Much weight? Nature, quite frankly, was a healing for me when I was caregiving. Both of my parents had Alzheimer's. And I learned that in the morning before I got them up, I would go out and I would watch the sunrise, and I would cry, and I would just take it in. And then later I realized it was therapy.
I would say in the last 5 to 7 years of my clinical practice, I became aware of spending time in natural spaces, in green spaces, being outside. Part of my intake questionnaire became, how much time do you spend outdoors? How much time do you spend in green spaces? I tried to educate them with regard to the benefits, not only physical health, just to be out and be active, but that the improvement in mental health, in both reducing anxiety, reducing depression, was really beginning to be empirically verified in ways that were quite powerful.
Thinking about those deep connections and what they mean for us and society and for environment, it's true that along that path, you're also going to experience lower blood pressure and reduced anxiety and better regulated heart rate and perhaps ease of stress. And it's so much more than that.
Being in the outdoors for me, I often call it my church. It's how I renew, it's how I fill my bucket. It's definitely a place where my brain slows.
All right, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here.
About.
I have been studying now the impact of nature for health and well-being in the hospital systems, not only for patients, but also for the healthcare providers. And there are now, throughout most major hospitals, healing gardens, knowing the impact on one's mental health, on the ability to heal faster, to be able to have less medication, lowering one's blood pressure, stress level, all the things that we've talked about for ourselves, too, are things that can be provided through healthcare as well.
And one more.
So, how would you describe your relationship with nature?
I'm in love with it. I hope to take care of it. I hope to keep interacting with it until I die.
For me, the word that comes to mind is oneness.
Kinship.
It's coming back to family. I mean, I literally speak to my surroundings.
I mean, you just shake your head. It's like, hug a tree. They know a lot.
You know, I have to go and be in nature for my mental health and well-being.
I need nature. Nature needs me.
It helps me get through the chaos of the day.
When I feel like my life really is hard, or I wish this wasn't so, or I wish that wasn't the case, or whatever, practicing, nurturing my relationship with nature instantly makes me feel grateful.
It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Okay. Let me switch back to my presentation here really quickly. Okay. So I do hope that you have a chance to to watch the full 20-minute documentary. I think Sammy did a wonderful job putting it together as a senior in college. To have the skills to do that is quite impressive. So we heard from these individuals talking about their relationship with nature, but I'll also ask you, and feel free to add it in the chat once again, how would you describe your relationship with nature? And can you do it with one word? I know that in my life, there's very little that doesn't connect back to nature, whether it's my career or my hobbies. I like to hike and explore new areas, or like to garden, and remember my youth jumping off of a rope swing in a lake. And even today, my kitchen cabinets are made of hickory. And I think that nature helps define a little bit who I am. So for me, I would use the word interwoven. I feel like my life is interwoven with nature. Oh, I love peace, harmony. Love seeing the responses here. So as you consider your relationship with nature and that word that comes in, I do like the complicated. It depends on the weather. I understand today with some of you seeing the amount of snow that's coming down, maybe it's not the best time to be looking at the window and thinking about that. But also, so in addition to our relationship with nature, I also want to talk about our positive impact on nature. So our time spent in nature has impact on us, but what about the other way around? What positive impacts can we have on our natural world? And I could also spend an enormous amount of time talking about the negative impacts that we see in nature from people, the litter on the roads, deforestation in rainforests, microplastic, there, it goes on, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, I really want to talk about the positive side of people in nature. And if you'll give me some latitude to brag for a little bit about Master Naturalists, because while I am biased, I do think Master Naturalists are some awesome people that are making a very positive difference in the world. So I'm going to chat a little bit about our Master Naturalist program and some of the work that Master Naturalists are doing. So just to give you a little bit of background about the Master Naturalist program, we are a network of well-informed volunteers and instructors who are dedicated to conservation service, that's volunteerism, as well as leadership and lifelong learning. Lifelong learning, I think, is an important aspect because even though we have the term master in our name, you don't become a master of anything in 40 hours. And I don't think you could really become a master of anything in the natural world, honestly. There's always something to learn. I've been doing trainings for 10 years, and every training I do, I learn something different. And even that those who have an expertise in one single aspect of their field are continuing to learn each day something different about that field. So our Master Naturalists attend a 40-hour training, and they then agree to provide a minimum of 40 hours of nature-based volunteer service and get that 8 hours of advanced training, so that lifelong learning, each year annually. And when they do that, we do recognize that minimum contribution, but with a cute little lapel pin with like some of the images that you're seeing below. Are some from the past few years. 2023 was our 10-year anniversary, so we had a silver pin with the Carner Blue to celebrate that milestone. In addition to the yearly recognition, we also recognize people's service milestones, so as they accumulate hours throughout the years. And we do have several Master Naturalists that are approaching 10,000 hours of volunteer service that they've provided, which is really impressive. Our content in our trainings, we do talk about the Master Naturalist community as a whole and the volunteer service areas, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But our topic area contents cover natural history, ecology, plant communities, human connections, geology, wildlife, weather and climate, water, and aquatic life. And we do have our materials both in a digital format and in hard copies. And you'll notice that this is a very wide broad topics. So in 40 hours, we do get to each of these topic areas, but they're covered in a kind of the broad sense. We don't go and do learning, you know, your top 10 birds or reptiles or plant species. It is a bit of a broader training than that, although it is very also experiential in nature. So what I mean by that is we learn outside. The majority of the training is spent outdoors in nature. And this year we do have 19 different training locations across Wisconsin. We open registration in January, so registration is open for all of these, although they do close quickly. In fact, we had one training close in 5 minutes after opened for registration, but there are some that are still open. So if you're interested in a training, feel free to go visit our website and learn more about the different sites. So even though each of these sites cover those same topic areas, it's very regionalized based on the location and the group that's hosting the training. So we partner together with nature centers and friends groups and different nonprofits, state wildlife areas and state parks, a variety of different organizations across the state that help us deliver these trainings and provide very memorable, fun, engaging, like I said, experiential learning outdoors. And master naturalists live all across the state. So these pins in the map here are just a pin for every zip code that we've had master naturalists take, where master naturalists live who have taken our training. So you can see we've trained almost 2,000 individuals in the past 12 seasons of master naturalist trainings. And last year, they provided service in 71 of the 72 counties across the state. So we do reach nearly all corners of the state. So who are master naturalists? And let's just maybe start with what is a naturalist? And in my mind, I look at the definition of a naturalist as someone who just has a curiosity about nature and seeks to understand it. So these are inquisitive people that might have questions like, why do fish have scales? Why is the bark different on a maple tree than an aspen tree? What are the different plants that grow in the prairie that's down the road? Maybe where does my drinking water come from? So naturalists don't just ask these questions, but they seek to find the answers. And often they then seek to share the information that they've learned with others. Our master naturalists are adults. We are adult only program. We don't provide service to youth, but we do focus on adults. So we've had folks from the ages of 18 to 92 take our trainings. We do see a spike in our demographics as people retire and have more flexibility in their schedules, but we also have folks who are college students, who are stay-at-home parents, farmers, working professionals, retired folks, as I mentioned, but mainly they are people who love Wisconsin and want to give back in one way or another. So what do they do? We have three main areas of volunteer service. One is citizen science, the second is education interpretation, and the third is stewardship. So citizen science is also often called community science or participatory science. It's basically collecting data that can be used for management decisions or to help inform people about the natural world. So if you can really basically think about anything that can be counted in nature, it can be monitored, and often there are programs that utilize that information to help manage them. So we have master naturalists who participate in bird counts, who monitor dragonflies, fish, native plants, uh, pollinators like monarchs and bumblebees, also water quality and weather. Um, Bats is another one. So basically, if there's things that are outside that can be counted, we probably have somebody out there with master naturalists working with a program to do that. That doesn't necessarily mean you always have to be outside and out in the woods to participate in citizen science. There are programs like Snapshot Wisconsin that is a program by the Wisconsin DNR that has trail camps on private properties across the state. And the images that are captured by these trail cams are uploaded, and individuals from anywhere around the world could go and help classify those photos and say, yep, there's 2 deer in this photo, and there's a ruffed grouse, and there's a turkey. And so if that's something that you're interested in doing, that's something you can do straight from your home. As well as weather monitoring is another good one that can be done from your home as well, collecting rainfall amounts and snowfall amounts. So that's citizen science. Education and interpretation, people sharing knowledge with others and helping people to connect with nature. So often we see master naturalists leading hikes and tours, education programs, but are also can be found at the front desk at many nature centers and state parks. They support educational efforts, so they don't always have to be in the front of a group, but they can help prepare for a training, prepare for a program, or help clean up from a program, or write news articles for a newsletter or for social media. So education can take on a lot of different forms. And then stewardship is a little bit more of the uh, hands-on caretakers of land, and maybe some more of the physical tasks like woodworking, like building a bat house, or um, nesting boxes, or Leopold benches, but also folks that do trail work. We have a lot of folks volunteering for Ice Age Trail Alliance, for instance, or helping to create native or pollinator gardens, or involved with land restoration efforts, like on prairies, they do prescribed burns and do invasive species control. So those are some examples of stewardship efforts. But all master naturalists volunteer on behalf of an organization or a project. They're not doing this on their own. They're doing this with guidance from a institution or organization, or a lead on a project. And there's well over 1,000 different programs, projects, and organizations that master naturalists have been volunteering with in the last 10, 11, 12 years. So, are they making a difference? I think so. These are our amount of volunteer hours that have been reported since our first training in 2013, starting with, I think we had about 16 people reporting hours our first year. And last year we had 873 people record volunteer hours in the total of over 74,000 volunteer hours. That's the equivalent of 35 full-time employees working for a full year. So lots of service that they're providing out there. And as far as where they're doing it, about a third of folks are providing, or a third of the efforts are being done in stewardship, 40% in education interpretation, and 27% in citizen science. And this is something that I've seen shift since the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, there was about 50% of the hours coming in were education and interpretation. And since the pandemic, I think folks have become a lot more involved with stewardship efforts and citizen science efforts that can be done a little bit more independently. And there just were less education programs happening during the pandemic. So 368,000 volunteer hours since we started the program. That in itself is a value in volunteer service of $11.7 million to our state. So not only are we saving our state and programs and organizations money, but we're actually doing really good work out there as well at the same time. So remember when I mentioned magic, where the magic happens? So this is where things kind of come together and that get me excited, because we have folks that are curious people who are becoming informed about nature, and they go out and they do good in our world, and they find that it's improving their own well-being when that wasn't even the reason why they were doing it, why they wanted to learn about it, and why they were going out and doing good. But they're finding out that it's actually improving their own well-being. And I'm just noticing that I'm wearing the same outfit in this picture that I am now, which was not intentional, but funny. So how do we know that this is happening? It started for me with this image is a bulletin board in my office, and it is layers upon layers of handwritten thank you notes from people who are telling me about how much it meant to them to be involved with the program, because we are finding that people were many of our people were coming into the program when they were in a period of transition in their lives. They moved to the state, they changed jobs, they retired, they were going through a divorce, or they lost a family member, or the kids left the nest. There was a transition, and they said participating in this program provided them with a sense of purpose. And they say they found their people. They often say they found their pack or their litter mate, which I think is kind of a funny way of saying it, but they found that they felt better by being out in nature, and often called it life-changing. And we started to realize that there were impacts to our Master Naturalist program and our efforts that we weren't even intending, but were really positive and really cool. So we thought, if it's good without even trying, how could we improve if we were even being more deliberate about it? How can we improve potentially other programming that's happening within Extension's world by what we're learning about how people value time spent in nature and learning while in nature? So in good Extension fashion, we started collecting information and doing more surveys because we're good at doing surveys at Extension. And I started just offering some open-ended questions in our surveys about how do outdoor activities impact your overall health and well-being? And we were getting really cool keywords coming up in this as far as their mental health and their physical health, and calming, positive, all sorts of fun words. So I took it a step further and I said, okay, what about the experiences that you've had while participating in the Master Naturalist training itself? What positive things happen? What did you experience? And this again was an open-ended question. But what we saw was there were some trends that were coming from the responses. And those trends were about physical health, the movement that is part of the training that it helps her feel like they're getting exercise and increasing their fitness, their mental health, feeling just refreshed and happy. A spiritual well-being. People mentioned the spiritual aspect of it in many different ways, whether it was meditative, well, it was that awe aspect that we were talking about before, or just being recharged or grateful. And then there was the appreciation of the natural world, so noticing the changes and learning new things. And then connectedness, being connected to a community of people or to just themselves or even to the world around them, but just connectedness. And so we realized that we were intentionally trying to do the appreciation of this and to some aspect the connectedness of it, but that we can be even more deliberate about the physical, mental, and spiritual side of our programming. So I'm curious here. I was going to do a poll, but I can't really do it in the way that I was expecting to do it. So I'm just curious in the chat, if you could add in, if you feel that you connect mostly with one of these things or multiple ones or all of them, I'd love to see some responses from you all as well. Because when we're giving these surveys to Master Naturalists, we realize we're a little bit of speaking to the choir, so to speak, that these are nature-based people to start with. And so I'm curious of what you all are thinking as well. And then I'll share with you what we found. This was after I think we used about 400 responses, I think, that we've had with this data. So we found that in appreciation, about 88% of people said that they felt better about their appreciation of nature. 75% said they felt more connected to nature, and 75% said they felt that it had a positive impact on their mental health. Spiritual health, 61% of people responded saying that they felt better about their spiritual health after taking the training. And 44% of the people said that they felt that they had a impact to their physical health due to the participation in the training. And 33% said they felt they had improvement across the board. So in all 5 of these aspects. And so this is a quote from a master naturalist. And it says, It has been difficult the last few years coping with loss. While taking the Master Naturalist training, I could focus on positive aspects of the world around me, and that was a welcome relief. In order to cope with grief, and in our current loss of common civility, I look for positives, and in this program is full of positive experiences, people, and attitude. And it's great to be surrounded by all the positivity and joy. And I think this quote, it reminds me a little bit of the quote by Fred Rogers that you may recall, Mr. Rogers, and he used to say, and I'm paraphrasing this, so I'm not sure the exact quote, but basically he said that his mom always taught him that when there was a disaster happening or there was things happening on the news that was not positive, that to just look for the helpers, and that in all times of disasters, you'll find helpers. And I do see Master Naturalists as being some of those helpers in our world. And I feel that this connection between our impact to nature, nature's impact to us, and the good that we can do, and that has a reciprocity in helping us as well, is super powerful. So do you have to be a Master Naturalist to go out and volunteer in nature? Absolutely not. I encourage you to go out, spend time in nature, volunteer in nature, but just spend time in nature and feel the benefits of that time spent in nature. You can go out, take time in nature, or even just be exposed to nature, as we learned with pictures. Find a nature-based organization if you want and spend time with them. You can benefit from this magic too. We'd love for you to also be part of our community. So if you'd like to become a Master Naturalist, I would love to chat with you more about that. But I encourage you to just learn more about nature, spend more time in nature, and give back to nature, and then just reap those magical rewards yourself for improving your own well-being in the process. And that's what I have. So I have my contact information here, our website, also a second email, the info at that can help answer any questions about the Master Naturalist program in general. But I encourage you to reach out to me at any time. I love chatting with people. So I would love to chat with all of you. And I'll take some time for some questions now if folks have questions. I'll leave this slide up for just a moment more and then I'll stop the share.
Awesome. Thank you, Becky. Thank you so much for the presentation.